initially wrote something about my deceased green card husband. What wasn't stated on his Tinder is that he digitally altered his photos and ultimately he had catfished me. He said, listen, I need a wife. Do you know anybody who wants to get married for money? We were married a month later, and January 2020, he got his green card, and he died in January 2021.
Why do you do the things that you do? No, seriously, why do you do the things that you do? Are you in touch with that kind of thing? Or no, that's not you. You're just one of those people, just kind of like a pressure cooker of chemicals and burning desires, just kind of like marching around, spewing out your best 3-minute monologue of who you'd like to be, still repeating that joke that got a laugh one time back in senior year. That's okay. Happy to have you here. But why do we do the things that we do? Because we're afraid? Because we are seeking attention? Because you're trying to get something? Like money? This might sound naive or idealistic, maybe you don't agree with me, but I always think it's deeper than money. Maybe most of us just aren't in touch with that. Like it's ego, or we like to be seen this way or that way, or maybe we're doing it for a good story. Maybe we see opportunities and they just feel like us. Am I projecting? That's what we're talking about today. A person who said yes to an opportunity, who engaged in a long shot, who got invested in over their head. Does this sound like you? Because ultimately that's what I hope you're going to be doing here, is looking for a little piece of yourself in our storyteller today. That is the best thing I think that any of us could get out of any of these conversations. A little bit of empathy. We're all monsters. Have some empathy. Welcome to the Earth Monster Podcast. I am Matt. This is the storytelling show that celebrates vulnerability and speaks to the darkest, messiest little parts of your heart about the lies that we tell ourselves every day, the stories that we use to get out of bed, the fantasies that we let propel our lives. I call these things necessary delusions, and you probably call them something different, like dreams or goals or plans, or maybe you don't call them anything because you just really feel comfortable in that little human ego, just like wrapped around you like a cozy, warm little blanket. Like, I'm the sun. Everything revolves around me. Does that work? Today we're talking to Jen. Jen responded to this ad that I post on Craigslist in the Los Angeles area. And Jen was one of the very first Earth monsters that I talked to when I started posting this ad. And so we are not going to be doing the usual sort of like deep dive into the greatest delusions of all time, starting at childhood, ending at present kind of thing. We might even be doing something more fun, because Jen came with a really specific story that she wanted to talk about. One of her greatest hits delusions, when she got married to someone to get them their green card. Don't judge, Jen. Have you married the wrong person? I have. And then I got married to the right person. Look, we all have a path that we're on. It's a really sad story. And you will notice that I'm not really trying to comment on the other person in this story today. I was talking to Jen, talking about Jen's delusions. This is Jen's story. And in that way, it's a fun story. And she tells it really well. It's funny. And it can be both things. It's cringy, it's wild, it's unexpected, it's tragic. And focusing on Jen, the person who was not afraid to reach out of the box and try to make life interesting. So let's go now to my conversation with Jen. Oh, and if you were the kind of Earth monster who probably needs therapy, but you'd rather listen to a podcast, subscribe to the show. You found your people. Now let's go to my conversation with Jen.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're supposed to be something, like something big? Like you do this to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, like a dagger through my heart, Jen. Yeah, good start.
Well, that is, I mean, I guess that's where I am too, is I am pursuing a bunch of things and I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this, like I'm on the right track. But, obviously there have been a few bumps along the way. So when I responded, I initially wrote something about my deceased green card husband. What I believe I said was that I would love to discuss the lies or the secrets that I kept for him and that now I look like a jerk for telling my truth. But that's what I thought about when I was thinking about my necessary delusion, and like the way that I think we all kind of keep secrets. And I learned that the secrets weren't even that well kept. We'll call him Tomas, and he's a South American immigrant, which was stated on his Tinder. But what wasn't stated on his Tinder is that he digitally altered his photos and ultimately he had catfished me. And at our first meeting, he walked in and he knew he wasn't who he'd represented himself to be. And he explained over a couple of years, he said, "Listen, I need a wife. Do you know anybody who wants to get married for money?"
So wait, slow me down for a minute. This was Tinder. You're living in the United States. He's in the United States, comes on this Tinder date in LA, and then within it sounds like the first 30 minutes or so pitches you that he needs a wife.
It was about 3 hours, actually. He was interesting, particularly because he was foreign, but also the stories that he told were interesting. He was a former police officer in his home country. He was really into video games in a dorky way, and it was really cute. He was a nice guy. And so then when that conversation shifted, I did need the money because I was in school at the time and I was facing down student loans. And what he said that he had to offer financially was exactly the amount of my student loans it felt meant to be.
Wow.
And we were married a month later, and January 2020, he got his green card. And by 2021, he was dead of a drug overdose. And in dealing with that, I learned about the multiple lives that he was living beyond what I knew of as his friend and his legal wife. And when I tried to discuss them with other people, I learned that everybody else also knew the same secrets that he had been keeping. He had told me that he had been keeping them from everybody else, that I was the only one who knew certain things. And he had friends who didn't know anything about his life. They didn't even know that I existed. And that was really hurtful because I was the one who was responsible for bringing him into not for bringing him here. He had been here illegally already, but I was the one who was anchoring him. And they were so mad at me when he died, as though it was my responsibility.
So when he asked you to when he was saying he needed to get married, you needed the money, this all sort of started to feel, kismet.
Meant to be, yeah.
Can you give me a snapshot of the wedding?
Oh my God. I was having the worst anxiety of my life, probably because I knew that something was going to go wrong. Um,
Where were you?
he was, we got married at his immigration attorney's office in the North Valley. I and my friends took the day off school, and some of them did my makeup. Three of them were there as my witnesses. And
And how were they
when we
feeling
pulled,
about the day?
everybody was really excited. They appreciated that I was doing something for the plot. This was going to be a story to tell.
Okay.
They were happy to be there. People would ask me, do you regret it? I don't regret it, but I just knew something was going to go wrong. But when we got there, he was there with a couple of friends that I knew, and they were on acid when we pulled up.
All of them, even
And
him?
yes, oh, especially him.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. And I was really thirsty that day and nobody had any water for me. The fountain in the hallway was broken. It was just so weird. And I walk into this room that has this Russian nightclub style mural, or like the cover of a little girl's notebook, like purple butterflies and hearts. That was the backdrop where we lined up with his goth porn star coworker, somebody's grandparents who were on the way somewhere else and did not speak any English. And he was South American, but they were specifically Mexican and they didn't know him. But the lawyer thought that they did because they both spoke Spanish. And then I had my three friends. And and his Russian roommate.
I mean, any red flags that are sort of going up for you at this time? Or like, who are you? What story are you telling yourself in this moment where you're like, this is a good idea?
I knew that I wasn't in a relationship with him. So I wasn't emotionally, there's a difference between the legal and emotional and the legal and financial responsibility for somebody and then the emotional responsibility. And I knew that I actually wasn't emotionally responsible for this. Just because we were married in this way doesn't mean that he was in any way representative of me. But I mean, yeah, come on. I know. But you got to do it for the plot. That's another thing that You got to just see, well, I'm already here. I'm already here.
I love the life philosophy. You got to do it for the plot. It speaks volumes about the type of person that you are. The emotional baggage. Now that would be heavy. That would be too much to bear. But the legal financial, come on. What are we talking about here? Sign the paper.
It's honestly the least terrifying part of a marriage. I had already been married at that point, married and divorced. I knew how that went, and it seemed like perhaps the business route was the better way to go the second.
Can you give us a ballpark of how much money we're talking about?
It it was supposed to be 17 grand.
Okay. How
Yeah,
much
and my loans
how
were
much
like
was it?
17.5. So it would have been really nice.
And that was another thing that didn't come to fruition later on.
Yes, yes.
All right, so go on. So you get married on this day. Anything notable? He's on acid. I mean, there must be a little bit of a story there, yeah?
I guess they just decided it would be a good thing to do because that's all I can really say for that. After we signed the papers, we went across the street to a bar. No, I'm sorry, it was downstairs from the law office in this strip mall. We went to this bar and we were the only people in there like 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. And they had karaoke, and my now husband and his coworkers, I don't remember if they didn't want to stay because they had to go to work that night or if they just were bored. But everybody left but me. So I was newly married, getting drunk on tequila, singing karaoke in a room by myself. The DJ had heard that there was a newly married bride there, but he didn't know who she was because there was just me sitting there. I was really confused. Then he realized it was me, and he was like, "Why? What the hell is happening? What is the situation?"
So where do we go from here? Do you guys live together? Do you like how many years total are we talking here?
We got married in April 2018, and he died in January 2021. And we did not live together. This is the thing, it was just so perfect.
It sounds
Were,
perfect.
we lived about half a mile apart, and so we'd meet up every once in a while to discuss we'd have a friend day and we'd discuss our lives and we'd bro out and he would give me my monthly allowance. And we would just get together and hang out, not like in any kind of romantic way at all. In fact, one day, because we live so close to each other, he calls me and he's like, "It's really important. I need you to come over here." And I had hair color in my hair. You can see I dye my hair. And so I'm like, "Okay, I'm coming over." I have hair color in. And he's like, "I need you to sit down." And he's like shaking and he's on the verge of tears. And I was like, "I need to rinse my hair out. You have to talk to me while I'm rinsing my hair out. Like, what do you need from me?" And he came out to me, and I was like, I immediately just started crying because I was like, why were you so afraid to tell me this? And like, why did you need me? He's like, "I need you to sit down. I'm so worried about what you're going to think." And it hurt me that he thought that about me in any way, and that he didn't feel that safe with me, even though I was his wife. Sorry. But
Okay.
I knew that he didn't come from, I mean, as far as I could tell, he didn't come from a background where even his parents would judge that. So I was surprised that he felt the need to be in the closet until he was in his 30s. And then he asked me not to tell anybody. And the reason I'm saying this now is because, he's deceased and I used a fake name, but also
Yeah.
because he also told everybody else at the same time. And I didn't learn until much later that I was not the only one who knew, but I was the only one who felt very responsible for keeping him in the closet until he felt safe enough. But there was a weird manipulation about it where he didn't want anybody to know that anybody else knew. And I don't know why. I wouldn't have agreed to marry him if in the month that we got to know each other that I didn't like him or that I didn't care for him. I believed in the things that he wanted to do with his green card, and like I believed in the ideas that he had. Like
What did he want to do? What were his ideas?
he wanted to work in video games. And I was like, he had already done IT and stuff, but without the green card, he couldn't work. And he had, I knew some people who worked in gaming, and I was like, okay, that's great. He was working under the table at a restaurant until he died. Well, I mean, he became legal and reapplied for his own job after he got his green card, but he was working under the table at a restaurant, as many documented immigrants do, and he felt stuck. And he also wanted to go visit his mother. You can't leave, he couldn't risk coming back and things like that. And I understood. And it's not the first time. Back in my early 20s, I had a friend from Taiwan who was having issues with immigration, and two of my friends got married then. And I said I would have done the same thing if I had a bigger apartment. So I did. I believe in it.
So now you're married, you're checking in, for these little sort of friend dates, which I can only assume is sort of part of the legal puzzle of if you guys are going to get tested together one day, you should know something about each other.
A lot of his dreams, a lot of his dreams and goals, a lot of his past stuff, he had drug problems before when he was in when he was in a semi-official position. The tiers of the police and military system in his home country are weird. I don't really understand them, but basically he would be like a traffic cop, I think. But at that time, there was a huge drug problem amongst the cops there, and he got in trouble at home, and that's actually why he came here. Also, besides he, when he didn't have anything else to do there, he came here and he believed in that he was turning his life around. And he just was so excited to be here in LA. And he told me about all the people he met. And like he was so excited to meet Tony Hawk and Post Malone. And he has photos with everybody. He once photobombed Marilyn Manson, which was, he loved living here and he was working towards the things that he wanted to do. And then he got into music, which is something that he wanted to do. But that's probably when the drugs came back.
And did a friendship start to sort of blossom here then?
Yes, yes, I definitely consider I, especially like with the coming out thing, I thought I was one of his closest friends, and especially because I think I was also one of his sober friends. Like I was somebody he talked to during the day, and so I felt like I knew the most about him, and we had the most real conversations. I guess, yeah.
And what was going on in your life otherwise at this point?
I was in school. Actually, I was so busy. I was doing 10-hour days, hairdressing. So I had let my license lapse in um, another state, and I knew I had to re-enroll in school, so I had to get re-licensed out here. Which I went to this accelerated program to do that because I already knew how to do it. So it was 10-hour days just to get through like a solid block of licensing,
Sure.
and that was rough. That was rough. But I was looking forward to the money. I was
Sounds
looking
like a
forward to not having to
scramble.
worry about it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a scramble. Oh, and that was what you were using the money for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It
So
seemed like it was it seemed like it would be perfect. I mean, I know everybody's like, "Oh, he's on acid," but he was just, living his LA life. It's not as though I've never done acid. I don't know that I would do it on the day I was signing papers, but hey, man.
I don't know that I would do it on the way to a lawyer's office. I don't know. That just sounds scary to me.
Technically, she was only a paralegal, maybe.
That you know what? You're right. That's a
Besides,
lot less scary.
client privilege.
Right. So how does this all evolve? How does it sort of ramp up?
Well, he got into music. He wanted to be a DJ, and he began playing these underground parties. And of course, there's a lot of powder at underground parties. And he realized after Corona began, after the pandemic began, he continued to party. I want to say somewhat bought into the idea that this was going to hugely change the way. He told me that we would have to get different jobs because our work was going to become too dangerous. And I said, doing hair in restaurants are not going to go away. Like he began to believe that this was, even though it was a globally catastrophic event, that there were going to be some serious changes. And I don't know about you, but I don't really feel like there were any ultimately. And any things got worse.
Sure, but what is consistent is people's ideas changing during that time, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
people maybe like airing out some of the ideas that they had been sort of harboring. Everything became a little bit murkier, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
people believed in, that kind of thing. So is that kind of how you were feeling with him? He sort of started talking about different things or different beliefs that you hadn't heard before, and
Yes. And it was strange because it seemed almost like antithetical to the partying aspect. that he began to go like a little more conspiratorial. But
Mm-hmm.
somehow those two things fed into each other for him. It was almost like it gave him a hyper focused aspect. And at some point, he realized that he had a problem. I don't know when. I didn't actually know that he had a problem, but he told me that he had been working on getting sober and
Mm.
he wanted to move out of the state and get divorced.
And how did you feel about that?
I said, great. Like, I was like, you said, like, because he told me he was getting sober and he had a plan for where he wanted to go next. And he was, again, back to the guy I knew with the goals, like there's a reason he came to the States and tried to do all this stuff. And he was refocusing and recentering his goals. And I thought that that was great. He sold all of his things. He got rid of his apartment. He went to live in a furnished rental. I don't even know. Then he died. Like shortly after New Year's, somebody posted on his Facebook page that Tomas had been missing for a week. I had talked to him a week ago, and when somebody posted, I didn't witness this. I don't know exactly what happened, but I get a phone call from a woman who tells me that Tomas is dead and that she was his landlord in the furnished rental that he had. And at that time, I didn't know what happened. I thought that he was getting ready to move. It didn't make any sense. But I learned that he had received a tainted bag of ketamine and gone to bed and never woken up.
Wow.
And
How does that all leave you? If this is too personal, just let me know. I've had a series of friends pass. I would say probably in the past like 10 years, and some of them were a lot closer than others. But grieving is such an interesting process. Maybe even particularly for people who aren't just all one thing to you, or you know what I mean. So
yeah, I have thought a lot about grief. And remember how before I said I wasn't emotionally responsible for him? It
yeah,
it was interesting in a way because I grieved very deeply in a way that I felt like I wasn't necessarily entitled to. I bawled for days and I was angry.
yeah,
Um, I was mad at him for being so close to achieving something that he wanted to and throwing that all away. And the I was mad at the people who gave it to him. But I had his roommate told me that nobody may have given it to him, that he may have been so hard up that he picked it up off the floor, and that made me so angry too because I talk about walking into something blindly, and but I thought, oh, I'm so glad stepping outside of it. I'm so glad that this happened with us and not with somebody who did love him in that full way, because I think that that would have been completely destructive to that person. It hurt everybody around him, just as people who knew him. Or that's the thing is, I say knew him, people who knew the things that he said, but didn't know all of the secrets that he kept. Some people, again, they didn't know I existed, and they were mad at me when I tried to do a GoFundMe for cleaning expenses. They attacked me on his Facebook page and they got my GoFundMe reported. And they began to yell at me about how, if I, as a good wife, I should have done more. And that made me so angry because I was like, you didn't even know about me. And now you're telling me all these traditional things. Like, it made me so mad that it, I was like, that's not even the kind of wife I was, bro. Like, that made me so mad.
yeah.
But I was mad that they didn't even know about me. It was disruptive to the, the process of getting everything sorted out for both his landlord and his family. But I was a secret. I was another secret for some people, for some part of his life.
You know, it's interesting what you said before about we were talking about like you didn't feel like an emotional connection or responsibility or something like that from the beginning, right?
Hmm.
And then I'm listening to you now filled up with emotion about this still, right? And it's just I'm always looking for that delusional angle, but it uh it makes me realize that that was a delusion, you know. Oh, well, this is just financial and legal, and maybe the delusion was that you're just not owning up to the part that we sort of get attached to the people that we spend time with. You know,
Yes.
it's like you don't get to decide, we don't get to decide our emotional attachment to someone beforehand. It's something that sort of naturally evolves unconsciously as we go, right?
Hmm.
Am I
But I guess
reaching?
the well, it wasn't. It wasn't. It's not as though we ever fell in romantic love. Wouldn't that
Sure.
be the ultimate, where we believed that this was all just for money, and then we actually ended up happily married, floating away together?
Right.
But no, it's not that I. It's not to say that I don't care, or I felt completely unattached. But yes, our the depths of our friendship grew over time. But the thing is that there was still he was still living his own lives. And all I had was to believe those until I found out later other things. You know, it does make me angry when I see somebody who doesn't live to their full potential because of the choices that they have made. So it made me mad that he accidentally died.
What
It
is
made
that
me really
what makes you angry about that? Somebody who doesn't live to their full potential. Can you unpack that feeling? Why does that make you so angry?
well. There's a couple different reasons for his specific instance. Sometimes I feel like people say that they want to, but they never will. And sometimes I feel, especially with him, that there were probably all these signs along the way, all these messages, and then he went and deviated from the path that he was on. He was going in the right direction. And he did all this work. I keep thinking about it. He did all this work. He lived in fear for a while. He had to catfish somebody on Tinder. He had to save up all this money from working under the table. And then he died. That's just such a bummer. That's such a what it's such a stupid ending to the story. Afterward, we were all sitting around the living room adjacent to the room where he died, and his landlord said, "Yeah, he really loved a certain fetishistic situation." And I was like, "Okay, so everybody knew about this." And his roommate goes, "Yeah, I knew too." And they were like, "You knew? You knew as the wife?" And I said, "Yes, we weren't together like that, but everybody knew." But he had kept it individual to each of us, an individual confession, and that was always strange to me. That he had told everybody the truth individually, but acted like it was a special secret. If that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I learned more about the drug problems from when he was a pseudo police officer, and that his family had done work to get him out of that. They knew more than they let on, his
Yeah.
family.
Well, Jen, how do we find you now?
Sometimes I feel like he was a spy and that he faked his own death and he went somewhere else. Sometimes I hope that that's what he did.
That's a nice way to tie it up. Do you have a lesson that you've learned that you feel like is good advice for most people?
Do it for the plot. Do it. It's going to work out no matter what. Like, I mean, for me, it did. For him, it did not. That makes me so mad still. I'm sorry to loop around. It did not work for him, and it makes me mad. But he still did it for the plot, I guess. You know?
Love it. Jen, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Jen, you have podcasts. Where can people find your podcasts and what are they about?
Uh, well, I have a podcast called Jen's Cuts, which is stories like this, stories about my life, memoiristic vignettes, usually about battling grief in one way or another. Grief and betrayal; those are big, um, big shadows in my life. And then I have a podcast called Old Bodies, all one word, Old Bodies, um, which is only on Patreon right now, but it's only $1. Um, and we are actually also looking for guests there too, but that is about living with chronic illnesses, disabilities, and aging in our modern society. Team Luigi.
What a conversation with Jen. Thank you for sharing that. What were we just talking about? Grief isn't a straight line. It doesn't always follow the rules that we expect. She talked about mourning someone she wasn't supposed to be grieving deeply for. Have you ever found yourself grieving a loss or feeling emotions that you didn't feel entitled to? I have. She talked about the burden and the power of secrets, what it was like to be a secret, to keep a secret, find out maybe it was never a secret to begin with. What secrets are we carrying and who are we protecting by keeping them? Are there parts of ourselves that we're sharing only with certain people, believing that those confessions are unique? We talked about the necessary delusion that we are able to keep things strictly business, that we can draw a hard line between legal or financial arrangements and emotional bonds. I don't think so. Maybe. Attachments sneak up on us. But what do we gain and what do we lose by pretending that we can separate our hearts from our actions? Can you relate with her frustration for unfulfilled potential? She grieved not just the person, but the possibilities lost. Oof. That disappointment of watching someone almost make it, only to fall short. And finally, do you do it for the plot, Earth Monster? Should you do it for the plot? Can we do it for the plot? Or is there always something else underneath with its hands on the wheel? So here it comes. Decide what kind of Earth Monster you want to be. Get an idea and hang on to it tight, like a dog with a bone. Think it, feed it, do it. And don't forget to subscribe. We are your people. We will be back here next week with more epic, everyday stories of success and redemption. You'll see me next time.